The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 39. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona. This is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
All right, everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria, and today I'm really thrilled to be joined by my good friend and brilliant entrepreneur, Chris Spearman. Dr. Chris Spearman, PhD and cancer curer. I know you haven't cured cancer yet, Chris, but we're gonna basically say that.
Not yet.
Chris is a global cover model and one of the world's leading online fitness coaches. Chris has scaled his fitness business to multiple six figures in the last few years and approaching the seven-figure mark now by helping other fitness professionals do the same. Chris is a brilliant guy, host of the Shred with Science podcast, as well as coming up soon here at the time that we're recording this, the Fitness Coach Freedom podcast coming out soon, also talking more broadly with entrepreneurs. And if you can't tell, Chris and I have spent a little bit of time together hanging out. If you search YouTube, you will find a video of car karaoke with both of us. That's so funny. Chris, welcome to the show. It's a thrill to have you.
Dude, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be on your podcast. I remember, the last few years of procrastinating about my podcast, and I took so much inspiration from everything that you've kind of helped me with. And when you mentioned your podcast, I was like, I think I should launch mine. I procrastinated about that probably a little bit too long, but thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And as typical in Chris Spearman fashion, like every idea I give you, you do and do it 20 times better than anyone else. So your podcast has been very successful. So for those of you who don't know, let's just talk a little bit about kind of your background. You started off in fitness, and now you're working with fitness professionals. Kind of talk a little about the kinds of clients that you are working with right now and kind of how you got there. What's the journey?
Great. So in short, I suppose I'm Irish originally, and I moved to London to pursue my doctorate, my PhD in cancer research. Obviously nothing to do with fitness really. When I moved over here, didn't really know anyone, decided to join a gym. I've been quite active growing up, almost played professional rugby in Ireland. So the gym seemed a logical place to go in a city of 9-10 million people. I didn't know anyone. So I joined the gym. That became my home. And I just started training. I'm from a really, really rural part of Ireland, as you know, because you were there. Yeah. Very, very close. You drove right past it a few years ago. And moving to London was a massive culture shock for me. And I suppose I definitely got refuge from training and the gym, and that it was a really kind of nice community gym. And fortunately, there were quite a lot of people in that gym who were bodybuilding or doing fitness shows. And I just kind of was like, as you always say, like I do with everything, I'm like, well, why can't I do this? And I gave it a go. Long story short, managed to get on the cover of, numerous magazines in the United Kingdom while I was studying my doctorate. And it kind of went from there. Then people started asking me to help them get in shape. And I think probably about a year into that journey, juggling, cancer patients, my PhD was in leukemia. So I was juggling that on one side, honestly struggling to kind of grow a fitness business because I had not scaled, didn't know how to scale, didn't even know what scaling was. And then Frank came along as a client of mine. And then, over, I suppose, the space of the first year, really, we just got closer and closer and closer. I'll tell you the short story and we can delve into it deeper, but we, became really close, great friends. And we decided that, maybe there was some scope for helping fitness professionals, obviously with Frank's expertise and basically the knowledge I sponged off you when we traveled Europe. to scale my own fitness business to now, multiple six figures, hopefully 7 in the next year or so. And since then, I've decided, listen, there's definitely room and scope here to help other fitness entrepreneurs or aspiring online coaches, PTs, to, do exactly what I did. So now my fitness business is scaled quite successfully, delegated, running, with very little work from me. And I have, I suppose, spent the last few months focusing on the fitness coach freedom, which, obviously our goal is to help, fitness entrepreneurs or budding fitness entrepreneurs. I'm not going to say get to 6 figures, because for some of us, our goal is to get some people who've never done any form of coaching just off the ground with one program. Some people, of course, we've excelled well upwards of 6 figures to the £250,000 mark. So we haven't really niched down, I suppose, where on that journey we help, but generally people who are kind of just starting off, maybe people who are frustrated. And as the name suggests, money is great, but they're the people who want a little bit more freedom.
Yeah. And I remember as you started off talking to just fitness professionals in general, there was oftentimes this belief anyway that people were, the only thing they could do in the fitness professional world is to kind of give their time away to some gym and be like a personal trainer in the gym, and that they were making almost no money on it. But they felt like that was kind of it. And you sort of broke that mold, and, lots of people were doing online stuff, but you kind of took the process online and did it in a way that people didn't feel like they could get the same results. Because I think it's pretty common in fitness to think, oh no, I got to be there. I've got to watch exactly what the form is and keep people on their program. And you kind of broke that mold and took it online pretty quickly. What was that like? Did you have to kind of learn through that process how to get results online?
I think so. Basically, I didn't have any other option because I wasn't a face-to-face personal trainer. I was in a hospital 14 hours a day, taking blood samples from leukemic patients, analyzing, essentially trying to figure out why they got leukemia in the first place. Now, I had really long commutes and very little sleep. And I was, okay, what am I going to do with this? I'm really passionate about fitness. I'm going to the gym after, I leave the hospital to de-stress. So my commute became the time that I was most active on social media. And I identified, obviously, that, if I can get on the cover of magazines, and surely I can help other people. Obviously, I'm some bit educated, at least, to be doing a doctorate. There's no way I can't help people. Like, if, for me, I felt like it was my obligation to help people. And I was fortunate in the sense that, unlike personal trainers, I wasn't trading time for money and then hoping to hustle the online on the side. I was working in a hospital doing my PhD, and then my passion was to help people online only. And I didn't have any other option. So I basically said, how can I serve these people as best I possibly can, because I don't have any other option. Yeah. And obviously I came up with a Skype program, which at the time was one of the first, out of anyone in the fitness space, which you joined, of course. And for me, that was the way that I could probably give a little bit more to clients, have less of them, yes, and probably get paid, a little bit more than I would have. And then I just began to grow and grow and grow and grow. And at that point, obviously, you played a massive role in terms of influencing that one-on-one structure. Yeah. And just coming back to kind of what you said about trading time for money, this is something that, for those of you who are in fitness, you'll understand. For those of you who don't know the fitness space, essentially, most personal trainers are either self-employed and they work in a gym and they pay a rent, or they are, let's say, hired by the gym. They don't have to pay rent, but in exchange, they need to do X amount of hours per week in order to have that freedom. Now, 99% of the time, the second option is just the worst option, because what happens is those PTs are getting paid by the gym essentially minimum wage to do very menial tasks. Whereas as a personal trainer, they're probably getting paid 5, 6, 7 times that amount. So it's that unsurety or I suppose, the lack of confidence in themselves. So listen, I'm more than happy to pay you whatever the rent is. Leave me have my time back. And I suppose for us right now in Fitness Coach Freedom, that is probably the biggest hurdle, or the initial hurdle, that we have with these PTs or aspiring online coaches, because they're left otherwise with, working crazy hours because their metric is hours, not money. They're trading time for money, and they're like, I need more hours, I need more hours, I need more hours, rather than going, how can I add more value to the service that I provide? And if I was to do that, i.e. working on my business and spend less time working in their business, they would definitely be more successful. So I think that's something that we really focus on. A lot of that has come down to, a lot of the guidance, I suppose, that I had. I suppose I feel lucky, you were paying me to basically sponge information off you. Like, how does that work?
Well, at the time you weren't charging as much as you are now.
This is true. This is true as well.
So I think I was getting a deal too, because you were underpricing yourself.
This is true.
But actually, I want to touch on that, because through this process of growing your fitness business, you actually did a couple of things that I think a lot of fitness professionals think are impossible. And frankly, if I want to tell stories you thought were impossible at the time too, until you actually did them. But but 2 things. Number one, you went from a one-on-one, so you're going to meet one-on-one with clients, into a group setting. And a lot of people in fitness think this isn't possible, or they think, if I go to group, it won't be as valuable. One of the things that I say is you can actually get better results out of a group program than you can out of a one-on-one program. And a lot of people are like, that's not true. That's not possible. But you did it. And you showed how that's possible, which was both a win for you and your clients. You got your time back and your clients got better results. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want you to talk about is you broke the price barrier. Where, in fitness and in a lot of B2C, when you're selling directly to consumers, a lot of people feel, well, you can't charge a higher amount. There's this barrier, you can only charge a little bit, a couple $100 a month. And you went from, less than $100 a month for some of these programs to over $3,000 a month for some of these group programs. And I think in fitness, people would have thought that was impossible at the time. Talk through what happened to allow you to do both of those things. You went to a group model and you increased the price both.
Right. So firstly, there is a separation, I think, between a group session with clients in person versus virtually online. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to go into the face-to-face, although I do think that there's value for a group sometimes. I think for me, it was obviously I only had the virtual option. So what we were doing when we were Skyping is I would block out, obviously I was in the hospital Monday to Friday, some Saturday mornings. So I would block out my whole Sunday to Skype clients one-to-one, Frank being one. And to me, firstly, even to get to that point was a scale. I offered more in the service, which was Skype. And I increased the price to probably more than anyone was charging at the time, although you'll agree it was probably a good price at the time for the service I was providing. Yet I was able to scale to that one day of work. And actually with that one day of work, I was earning 6 figures as a student. So that was pretty cool, firstly. And then obviously from there, I sponged more information off you to get it in a group setting. And what I actually did then, if you remember rightly, about 3 years ago, maybe more, you said, listen, why don't you do this like cover model Skype program? And I was like, oh, how would that look? And then I remember the price point. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But I said, okay, that's such a good idea. Right? Okay, how would that look? Okay, so fast forward now 3 years, let's say 3 years. instead of what at one point was, believe it or not, 45 to 50 Skypes on a Sunday, which was literally 15, 16 hours back to back of 20, 30-minute calls. That was, over six figures, but just barely. What I've done now is I have scaled it, and essentially we've got 4 group calls. We've got, let's say, an intermediate or beginner or transformation or people who want to lose weight. Then we've got maybe a slightly more intermediate, regular gym goer potentially, but has maybe higher expectations of what they want to achieve. Then the next one is our academy, which is people who are competing on shows. They're doing fitness model shoots. They're potentially getting on the cover of magazines. And then the 4th call is, like you mentioned already, our fitness coach freedom. Basically, in some way, there's crossovers in all of them, but a crossover of the people in the academy who want to make a career long-term out of this. So there is a crossover. And the best thing about that is you see almost like a graduation from one to the next, depending on their progress, but they're aware of those steps. So it's an incentive, but they also see other people go through those steps. So now put this into perspective, we have what was maybe 50 plus. We've got anything from 100 to 200 people on 4 calls. I show my face for 4 hours. I'm present on all 4 calls out of choice. I don't need to be there because I now have a team of coaches that do it. But for me, I absolutely love what I do. And I think, the amount of tears I probably shed with you over the years based on what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve, or how proud I was and still am of where you've come, or how far you've come. I love it. Like I leave those 4 hours of calls knowing that my business is, upwards of $500,000 based on what is essentially almost 4 hours of work a week, and adding so much value to between 100 and 200 people is incredible. So obviously that's it scaled. And if someone tells me, can you scale it more? I'll be, yeah, probably, let me ask Frank. So, that is incredible, obviously, to get to that point and be so grateful that I'm there. But also, of course, then there are other people who are on other lower ticket programs who we will eventually, I don't want to say, upsell because it's about the upsell, but let's say graduate onto those calls. So we make it very clear that there's almost like not a pecking order, because different people have different goals, but just to show people that there's a path there. And interestingly enough, I had a call last night, and she's in Toronto at a crazy hour my time. And that was an introduction call. So I do an introduction, call for some clients. She's only just starting, I suppose, her own business. She came from the very first call less than a year ago. She lost 114 pounds and has progressed to the next stage. Then she is obviously trying to get in fitness model shape. And she said, listen, you know what? I'm loving this so much. So many people are asking me about my journey so far. Why am I going to wait? Like, what's it going to cost? What's it going to take for me to join your highest program? And I said, my answer was a lot less than you're going to make if you join it. And straight away she was on. So
yeah, that's great. That's the right
transition. Yeah, of course.
That's what you've done. You set up the structure just perfectly. You're describing a customer journey mapping exercise. You're essentially, what's the customer journey the lifetime of your customer? What are the phases they go through? And that's a thing that a lot of people don't do, is they don't see the long-term progression of their clients. So therefore they're kind of making up what's next? I actually was talking to someone just earlier today. That's exactly what their challenge was. They have a bunch of people in a program, and now they're like, we're trying to come up with what's next. It's like, you should be doing it the other way around. You should already know what the target is. And some people are going to go on part of that journey, and some people are going to go on the whole journey. But either way, you've kind of figured it out. And you've got now product areas around each one. And
to answer your second question, I suppose, in terms of pricing. So firstly, obviously, to get people on a call in the first place, I was able to increase my price and justify why that was so. And then now, obviously, we've got people on the call. So obviously we're getting paid more per hour. And I would highly recommend anyone listening to this who hasn't met you or hasn't gone to, any of your events to absolutely do, because networking is king. And I suppose, another mentor, that I've kind of leaned in with over the last year, invited me to a mastermind, and I got there, and the networking there was so key because I was able to see, I remember going there, actually, it was the week before then, a supplement company that I work with had a get together, and it was just before I went to a mastermind networking, and a lot of us were sponsored by the same protein company, and we were going over to the event afterwards. And I remember sitting there, and I'm thinking, yeah, you know what, I'm doing pretty well. I'm being flown over here to Miami. Everything's going well. And I turn around to one guy, and I mean this in the nicest way possible. Like, he's such a nice guy. And I was like, oh, great. And so what do you charge your clients? And he told me, and my face hit the floor. And I was like, and he's a lovely guy. But when I was kind of going, okay, well, I've got a PhD. I've been 10 years in university, kind of learning the human body. I've been on the cover of now over a dozen magazines. I've been training thousands of clients. And, without any disrespect, I was like, how can he justify that price?
Yeah, right.
I said, how can you justify charging that? And he said, well, because I showed him the value and I don't accept anything less. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's what I have to do. Yeah. So now we've restructured. Obviously, there's no point going into, I suppose, the sales process. But one thing that is relevant is beforehand, it was very casual. Someone would email, I reply in an email, maybe sign them up. Now, because it's so high ticket, I can afford to get almost everyone on a call. Yeah. And I explain the value. And now either I've got, one of my team get on the phone with a potential client or a lead, or I get on the phone as well. I ensure what their pain points are. A lot of the coaching calls or the sales call tactics that we did back when you gave me the lowdown, and finally 2 years later, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, Frank said I should do this. And it's being able to justify that. For example, a call last night, a client had spent €6,000 on a personal trainer for a whole year. And I was like, when we broke it down, it wasn't that expensive. It worked out at an average rate. And I said, okay, well, were you happy with what your transformation in that year? Yeah, I suppose so. I was like, was it worth €6,000, 6,000 euros? And he was like, no. And I said, well, I guarantee you in 12 weeks, I will get you a better result for a fraction of that price. It's still far more expensive for me compared to what I was charging, but I showed the value there. Yeah. And, I went from, with you, I think when you were on the program, we had, let's say maybe 10 or 15 people on that program. And if I got like a £214 sale, I don't know if you remember what your invoice was, £214 sale at the time for the month, I was like, oh my God, I just got a new client this week. This is amazing. And now I'm closing, day before yesterday, in the space of an hour and a half of calls, I closed $7,500 worth of sales. Yeah. And I'm not even doing the coaching. I just happen to be on the calls. Yeah. So, my advice to people out there is listen to Frank when it comes to scale. And obviously, just value your worth in terms of what product you're providing, I think.
Yeah, that's, I think a lot of people struggle with this mindset around price. That's one of the areas I spend a lot of time on, is how do you price a service? And I don't think I've really run into anyone who's overpriced their service. I've run into people who can't justify their price, for sure, occasionally. But most of the time, especially in service professionals like fitness and health and wellness, there's a huge undervalue because they don't know how to establish a value proposition. One of the things I think you've done really well is, because there's this journey map towards cover models or being in shows and winning prizes for those, as well as establishing the entrepreneurial part of it all. Your value proposition is a lot easier to justify now, but you still have to recognize it and at least have a conversation.
For sure. So I'm just going to just throw this out there, because your listeners won't know this, and you don't know this, but you probably are not surprised. When you came up with that idea I should be paying you royalties, shouldn't I? When you came up with that idea for the academy, or the Cover Model Academy, I was like, Frank, what should I price it? And you were like, well, $2,000, but you're not going to charge that because you won't be comfortable, and you may never be comfortable charging that. So let's just do 1,000. And I was like, okay. And I started just kind of going like, no one's going to pay that, Frank. No one's going to pay that. I don't know if I ever told you this. I posted it on my page and I got absolutely slammed by everyone in the UK fitness scene. They were like, this is extortionate. Who do you think you are? This is a joke. So what I actually did is I scribbled out the price and I put it up again, and had been putting it up for about a year saying, contact me for details, because I was just so terrified of that response. And probably because, guess what, if someone says something and you get it, you get that sort of, initial response, it's because you agree with what they're saying. And I didn't believe in myself.
Right.
You believed in me long before I believed in myself. And I posted that up and I scribbled out the writing. I don't know if you realize that. And I posted it for a while. And it started to take off at a fraction of that price. Now, someone would be very lucky to come on at that price. I would be like, you're lucky. So it is a case of being a little bit ballsy and just going, on the flip side of the coin, I suppose one thing that I have done, and I hope your listeners will do, is invest in themselves. Mm-hmm. And as I started to invest in myself, luckily we're great friends, so I was able to get a huge amount of your information, from spending time with you. But I think investing in people, for me and for your listeners, into you or anyone else, really puts it into perspective. I'm like, well, if I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars and almost $100,000 in the space of a year on personal development, I'm not going to be charging $100 a month to a client to relay that information to them.
Right.
Right. And I suppose getting my own fitness coach, who was a complete idol of mine since I got in the fitness space, and he charged an extortionate amount of money, like far more, clearly far more than I charge. But he said the price, and I didn't even bat an eyelid because it was him. Right. So what I've tried to focus on now is to elevate my social status or my celebrity status in terms of what I'm doing, which you told me again years ago: get a book, get a podcast, do all of these things to increase, obviously show your value indirectly, but to increase your celebrity status, so that why wouldn't they want to work with you for that price? Right. Slowly I'm implementing these things, but I'm so grateful. But if anyone's listening to this, shortcut your journey to success. And obviously if they're listening to you, they're a fan of you, and just if Frank says something, instead of being like, maybe, just do it. Just do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, for me now, as I take on clients, that's like the number one question I ask them before I sign up. Like, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't want to be arguing with you about this. Like, you do it. This is how it's going to get done. I've told everybody I'm not a coach. You're not going to get so what do you think the right thing to do is now? I'm just going to tell you, like, go do that now.
Yeah.
So that's
we had a private joke, myself and Frank, when we were in Budapest. It started in Budapest when we were traveling Europe, and at the time Frank was had a client that he was working with who was on. Can I say how much the retainer was? Surely I can. For you, it was a small retainer at the time. It was like $18,000 a month from this client that one of your clients you were working with. And it was a bit of a stressful. Obviously, we're not going to go into it because I don't want you to get sued or anything. But it was a stressful role that they had you doing, and even I could see that you were being very generous with your time. And at the time, I was like, dude, you're getting paid $18,000 a month from this client. I would do anything for that. And then I remember, obviously, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months passed. My business had just kind of taken off. And by the time, we kind of reached out and we were chatting again, you were like, how's the business going? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm over $18,000 a month, so I think I'm doing all right.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things, I suppose you make mistakes and you learn. Yeah. But yeah, scaling is massive. And now with a lot of the entrepreneurs that are coming through, or the aspiring online coaches, PTs that want to transition online, obviously we have to get them set up. And they're like, oh, you're always on about scale. This is great. Let's scale. And I'm like, you're not in a situation yet to scale. You don't have, a lot of the fundamentals in place yet before you have to scale. But that being said, though, I do want to say one thing, and maybe you may disagree with me, but because I didn't scale at the start, and I was training twice a day, and I had a PhD, it really instilled a work ethic in me that was just unrivaled. So then when I did scale, I was like, I had two options. I was like, do I kick back on a beach in Bali and just let people run this? Or do I absolutely grind at other areas of my business in terms of content and podcasts and doing, and you know, being able to take some time out to do podcasts with you and stuff. And clearly I did the second option because I love what I do. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. You know, some people will decide to do that, and that's probably a sensible option. But I think you know, that work ethic that I did have really did stand to me now, you know, so that I am going to push for that 7 figures. And, you know, that sounds mad. That sounds mental. For those of you guys who don't know, I'm from the most rural part of Ireland where, you know, there's sheep everywhere, and I'm not used to this business. So I'm extremely grateful for Frank entering my life, and extremely grateful to be able to do podcasts like this. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you about the work that, like, I do think that a lot of people have this idea that scale means no work or something like that, and that's definitely not true. I mean, at the beginning of anyone's business, you put the time and the effort in, you work for sure. For me, scale isn't so much a matter of work; it's a matter of design. So you just have to design things in a way that eventually you can grow. And you're going to put the work in one way or the other. The question is, are you going to have to redesign everything later? When things are up and running, I mean, you might think you did this too late, but actually you didn't. You were able to scale early on enough that it wasn't really painful. I mean, there are people who are already over the 7-figure mark who didn't scale, didn't design things for scale, and now it's a real hassle for them, and it's painful, and trying to switch over, you know, to scale in the middle of that is really challenging. So I wouldn't disagree with you at all.
The one thing I would say as well is that, you know, because I was, well, let's say, forced to scale or at that period of time, I did scale, you know, I'm very aware of the benefits of doing that. But one of the things I suppose that I did take through the scaling process was to identify the things that don't need to be me. So there's a difference between the things in a business that need to be you and the things that don't need to be you. And the things that don't need to be you, I would delegate really quickly. And I would hire an assistant coach far sooner than I did. I would hire a personal assistant far sooner than I did. And I would double down on the things that do need to be me. Unfortunately, like with a lot of, you know, the guys coming through our mastermind, the Fitness Coach Freedom, is they're trying to do too much of a lot of the stuff that doesn't need to be them at all. Right. That can get really, really overwhelming. If, you know, we have some funny stories whereby, you know, I even have to tease some of my clients into scaling. And one of the ways I did that, this is a bit funny, but I have he's actually one of the coaches within the business now because he's done so well. He was a personal trainer, was earning maybe $30,000-$40,000 a year, and he's now, you know, maybe just over quadrupled his income. He's at $120,000-$130,000 a year in a very short space of time, and most of that is now online. And he's terrified to delegate, terrified. So we created an imaginary person called Jason, who he acts as Jason. So it's like the stepping stone to delegating. So I'm like, so I will actually like full on, I will be saying, okay, so what's Jason doing this week and what are you doing this week? And so Jason has tasks and he has tasks. And now we're at the stage where we can hand Jason's tasks off to an actual Jason. And that was just a really good psychological thing for me to be able to, because you know what it's like. I know what it's like. When you build something from scratch, you become so terrified of losing it. You know Charlie, right? So Charlie was a client of myself and Frank's. He's only just hired his first coach.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'll get him to listen to this for sure, but he's only just hired his first coach. And he messaged me today going, oh my God, I should have done that sooner. And I was like, yeah, you think?
That's funny. Charlie.
And then he said, "Oh, I should have increased this morning. Oh, I should have increased my prices sooner than I did. I think. You think?"
That's yeah. You've like invented a new psychological practice for entrepreneurs who are
Jason, use it.
That's brilliant, man. It's like basically using sock puppets in group coaching with all of your.
That's it. Yeah.
You can't talk to me, but talk to the puppet.
because also what it does is as well is it's like that stepping stone between. So he actually signs off Jason at suchandsuch.com. So it's him.
Yeah.
But he's easing out. So the clients are getting used to there being somebody else before he's actually hired someone and started paying someone, and then it's too late to whip it back.
Brilliant.
It's quite good.
It really is.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, Chris, we could talk like this for hours, and I know you're really busy, and we're kind of out of time. So I appreciate you spending time with us. This is totally amazing. I love the stories, the transformation you've gone through in your business, and what you're doing with other people is like picture perfect, example of what it takes to grow and scale a business, and that you can do it in the personal finance or personal fitness area is amazing as well. So congratulations on all the great stuff that's happening for you. You'll crack that. You'll be over 7 figures this year. I have no doubt, for sure.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, you don't need luck. You got skill. Mind you. But thanks so much. Hey, so for listeners who want to connect with you, learn a little bit more about what you're doing, and kind of take a peek behind the curtain in your own business, what's the best way for them to contact you? How can they get
Great. You? So probably the best place to go, if I'm going to leave or give Frank the links for the podcasts to put in the show notes. So the Shred with Science podcast is my fitness business. Everything kind of health, fitness, science related. And then the Fitness Coach Freedom podcast is for budding fitness entrepreneurs who want to grow their business online. The best place to catch me is on Instagram directly. I delegate virtually everything other than a lot of that, actually, to be honest, because that's something that I really love doing, is staying on top of actual interactions with people who are dropping DMs. So the best place is at Spearman Chris is my fitness page, or if you want to go to my entrepreneur page, it is at chrisspearman.coach.
Right. And those links are here below the video or on the show notes page. If you happen to be listening to this audio out and about, come on back to the show notes page and you can click through directly to connect with Chris. Hey, man, it's been a blast talking to you. It's always great to catch up on what's going on. We'll definitely have to do another trip sometime and record another car karaoke episode at some point.
Honestly, for those of you guys who haven't seen it, that's well worth a look. If you want to see what Frank's like singing Oasis, this is a good place to go. Dude, I'll be out in Arizona before the end of the year for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely connect. And I'm not going to put the link to that video in the show notes. If you really want to see that, you're going to have to go search YouTube yourself for that. All right. Hey, thanks so much, Chris, for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Dude, absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. To know that you also have busy lives and schedules. So if you're spending time with us, really appreciate basically honoring us with your time and listening to the stories that other entrepreneurs have about taking their business from 6 to 7 figures. And this has been the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll catch you next time. All right, take care. Bye-bye.